face wore a strange look. Mr. Naylor Brent's brisk voice broke the silence. "These gentlemen are from Scotland Yard, Wilson," he said sharply, "and they want to know just what happened here on Tuesday night. Tell them all you know, please." Young Wilson's pale face went a queer drab shade like newly baked bread. He began to tremble visibly. "Happened, sir? Happened?" he stammered. "How should I know what happened? I only got there just in time and " "Yes, we know just when you got there, Mr. Wilson," said Cleek. "But what we want to know is what induced you to go down into the vaults when you fetched the inspector. It seemed a rather unnecessary journey, to say the least of it." "I heard a cry, at least " "Right through the closed door of a 9-inch concrete walled vault, Wilson?" struck in Mr. Brent promptly. "Simmons had been shut in there by myself, Mr. Headland, and " "Shut in, Mr. Brent? Shut in, did you say? Then how did Mr. Wilson here and the inspector enter?" Young Wilson stretched out his hand imploringly. "The door was open," he stammered. "I swear it on my honour. And the safe was open, and the notes were gone." "What notes?" It was Mr. Brent's voice which broke the momentary silence, as he realized the significance of the admission. For answer the young man dropped his face into his shaking hands. "Oh, the notes, the £200,000. You may think what you like, sir, but I swear I'm innocent. I never touched the money, nor did I touch my Mr. Simmons. I swear it. I swear it." "Don't swear too strongly, or you may have to unswear again," struck in Cleek severely. "Mr. Narkom and I would like to have a look at the vault itself, and see the body, if you have no objection." "Certainly. Wilson, you had better come along with us. We might need you. This way, gentlemen." Speaking, the manager rose to his feet, opened the door of his private office, and proceeded downstairs by way of an equally private staircase to the vaults below. Cleek, Mr. Narkom, and young Wilson, very much agitated at the coming ordeal, brought up the rear. As they passed the door leading into the bank for the use of the clerks, old Calcott came out and paused respectfully in front of the manager. "If you excuse me, sir," he said, "I thought perhaps you might like to see this." He held out a Bank of England £5 note, and Mr. Brent took it and examined it critically. Then a little cry broke from his lips. "A541063!" he exclaimed. "Good heavens, Calcott, where did this come from? Who " Calcott rubbed his old hands together as though he were enjoying a titbit with much satisfaction. "Half an hour ago, sir. Mr. George Barrington brought it in, and wanted smaller change." George Barrington! The members of the little party looked at one another in amazement, and Cleek noticed for a moment that young Wilson's tense face relaxed. "Mr. George Barrington, eh?" The curious little one-sided smile travelled up Cleek's cheek and was gone. The party continued their way downstairs, somewhat silenced by this new development. A narrow dark corridor led to the vault itself, which was by no means a large chamber, but remarkable for the extreme solidity of its building. It was concrete, as most vaults are, and lit only by a single electric light, which, when switched on, shone dully against the grey stone walls. The only ventilation it boasted was provided by means of a row of small holes, about an inch in diameter, across one wall, that nearest to the passage, and exactly facing the safe. So small were they that it seemed almost as if not even a mouse could get through one of them, should a mouse be so minded. These holes were placed so low down that it was physically impossible to see through them, and though Cleek's eyes noted their appearance there in the vault, he said nothing, and seemed to pay them little attention. A speedy glance round the room gave him all the details of it: the safe against the wall, the figure of the old bank servant beside it, sleeping his last sleep, and guarding the vault in death as he had not been able to do in life. Cleek crossed toward him, and then stopped suddenly, peering down at what seemed a little twist of paper. "Hullo!" he said. "Surely you don't allow smoking in the vault, Mr. Brent? Not that it could do much harm, but "Certainly not, Mr. Headland," returned the manager warmly. "That is strictly against orders." He glared at young Wilson, who, nervous as he had been before, became obviously more flustered than ever. "I don't smoke, sir," he stammered, in answer to that managerial look of accusation. "Glad to hear it." Cleek stroked his cigarette case lovingly inside his pocket, as though in apology for the libel. "But it's my mistake. Not a cigarette end at all, just a twist of paper. Of no account, anyway." He stooped to pick it up, and then giving his hand a flirt, appeared to have tossed it away. Only Mr. Narkom, used to the ways of his famous associate, saw that he had palmed it into his pocket. Then Cleek crossed the room and stood a moment looking down at the body, lying there huddled and distorted in the death agony that had so cruelly and mysteriously seized it. So this was Will Simmons. Well, if the face is any index to the character, which in 9 cases out of 10 it isn't, then Mr. Naylor Brent's confidence had certainly not been misplaced. A fine, clean, rugged face this, with set lips, a face that would never fail a friend and never forgive an enemy. Young Wilson, who had stepped up beside Cleek, shivered suddenly as he looked down at the body and closed his eyes. Mr. Brent's voice broke the silence that the sight of death so often brings. "I think," he said quietly, "if you don't mind, gentlemen, I'll get back to my office. There are important matters at stake just now, so if you'll excuse me. It's near closing time, you know, and there are many important matters to see to. Wilson, you stay here with these gentlemen, and render any assistance that you can. Show them round if they wish it. You need not resume work to day. Anything which you wish to know, please call upon me." "Thanks. We'll remember." Cleek bowed ceremoniously as the manager retreated. "But no doubt Mr. Wilson here will give us all the assistance we require, Mr. Brent. We'll make an examination of the body first, and let you know the verdict." The door closed on Mr. Brent's figure, and Cleek and Mr. Narkom and young Wilson were alone with the dead. Cleek went down upon his knees before the still figure, and examined it from end to end. The clenched hands were put to the keenest scrutiny, but he passed no comment, only glancing now and again from those same hands to the figure of the young cashier who stood trembling beside him. Convulsions," he finally said softly to himself, and Mr. Narkom watched his face with intense eagerness. "Might be aconite, but how administered?" Again he stood silent, his brain moving swiftly down an avenue of thought, and if the thoughts could have been seen, they should have shown something like this: convulsions, writhing, twisting, tied up in knots of pain, a rope. Suddenly he wheeled swiftly upon Wilson, his face a mask for his emotions. "Look here," he said sternly, "I want you to tell me the exact truth, Mr. Wilson. It's the wisest way when dealing with the police, you know. Are you positively certain Simmons said nothing as to the cause of his death? What exactly were his last words to you?" "I begged him to tell me who it was who had injured him," replied Wilson in a shaking voice, "but all he could say was, 'The rope, mind the rope. The rope of fear, the rope of fear,' and then he was gone. But there was no sign of any rope, Mr. Headland, and I can't imagine what the dear old man was driving at. And now to think he is dead dead." His voice broke and was silent for a moment. Once again Cleek spoke. "And you saw nothing? Heard nothing?" "Well, I hardly know. There was a sound, a faint whisper, reed-like and thin, almost like a long-drawn sigh. I really thought I must have imagined it, and when I listened again it had gone. After that I rushed to the safe and—" "Why did you do that?" "Because he had told me at dinner time about the notes, and made me promise I wouldn't mention it, and I was afraid someone had stolen them." "Is it likely that anyone overheard your conversation then? Where were you lunching?" "In the Rose and Crown." Wilson's voice trembled again, as though the actual recalling of the thing terrified him anew. "Simmons and I often had lunch together. There was no one else at our table, and the place was practically empty. The only person near was old Ramagee, the black chap who keeps the Indian bazaar.